Hey, hate to interrupt all this great podcasting that's going on, but I got to tell you about another great podcast. Every Friday, the Ricochet Flagship podcast, where we're going to way towards 600 episodes. How did we get that far? Well, I guess people like it. Rob Long, founder, Peter Robinson, founder, and me, James Lilacs, talk to a variety of really interesting guests, smart folks, because these guys got, they got Rolodexes. They know who to call. So it's about today. It's about the events of tomorrow. And it's also about the world in which we live culturally, politically, socially, whatever. Peter Robinson, Rob Long, and myself, James Lilacs, every Friday. The Ricochet Flagship podcast every Friday. Join us, won't you?
This is London Calling.
London Calling.
Polling is now showing we could lose 90 seats, and we know that we still seem to be in denial. And it's time to shake off this partisan Stockholm syndrome. I believe our party brand is suffering. We will lose the next election on current trajectory, as reflected in recent elections, by local elections. The party does seem to be a little adrift at the moment as to what we stand for, our big vision, what our answers are to provide the solutions, the innovative solutions to the challenges ahead.
Welcome to London Calling with me, James Dellingpot, and my very good friend, Mr. Toby Young. Tobes, we had the most annoying... I think in the history of London Calling, this was the most annoying incident ever. In that we'd recorded getting on for an hour of podcast, and then literally an act of God stopped us. Lightning struck my house. All electricity went off. Well, I don't know if it struck the house, but there was thunder and lightning nearby. All the electricity went off, and my QuickTime went down. And when I turned the computer on again, everything had been lost. And I tried to use some sort of retrieval software. It didn't work. It was bloody annoying. $49 down the drain. And
This is the third time we've tried to record this episode, because initially you disclosed that something wasn't working. That was only after 5 minutes, so we had to start again.
So that was fine.
But yeah, I think this is the first time in the history of London Calling that the recording has failed twice in one episode.
And
so this is our third attempt.
We've got to recreate all our banter, all our jokes.
Bon mot.
Yeah, all our bon mot. Like we originally started off talking about, are Mummy and Daddy going to fight again? And about those of our dodgy listeners who only come to see, a bit like, when my dad used to be a racing driver, an amateur racing driver, and some people just used to turn up to the track to see the crashes, and that's the kind of people we don't want, because it's actually, I think I'd be one of the people coming to see the crashes if I were a listener, not a. Do you know what? Yes. I see what I just did discover the other day. I had some friends over from Australia, and apparently they said, "Oh, you all our mates listen to you. You're really popular over there." I said, "Really? What? Toby as well?" And they said, "Yeah."
Wow.
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought? Who would have thought that? I think some people said to me after listening to last week's episode that even though they liked the fact that we were getting on better and weren't at each other's throats, it was a little bit boring compared to the previous week. Whereas even though it was sort of painful to listen to the kind of vituperative exchanges and our kind of like a rancid old married couple who can barely stand each other, even though they find it painful to listen to that, they couldn't take their ears away, as it were, and they did quite, in retrospect, they kind of preferred it to our much more equitable, amicable.
Do you know what's really sad,
Toby?
I reckon that the one we didn't, a bit like the person from Porlock interrupting Coleridge's reverie. What's happened here is that another classic episode has been lost forever, because I think my extended metaphor about the PG Chips chimp.
Oh, that was good. We should try and recreate that.
So we try and recreate that.
The context was I was referring to. So this was. I managed to steer James onto.
You did. You tried.
onto news and current affairs, which I know he's reluctant to discuss. But we got onto the looming leadership crisis in the Conservative Party, and the question of whether Boris Johnson's days are numbered following the publication of the Sue Gray report, which we now discover was the kind of censored version, and there is an X-rated version floating out there somewhere, which will no doubt be published in the next few days. Yeah. Well, I say X-rated, it's just kind of, it's got a few more details in it. Like, one of the details is that a civil servant reported that Carrie, Boris's wife, on the day she threw the party for Boris, she was up in the Downing Street flat and texted Boris to say, "I'm up in the flat with the gays," by which she meant, I think, a couple of gay special advisors. But that was left out of the Sue Gray report that was published last week.
That's made me actually the first thing I've heard that's made me warm to Carrie. I like that you'd thought she'd be achingly, gag-inducingly PC.
Well, it wouldn't refer to the sexual orientation of members of staff at Downing Street. Yeah. Maybe that's why it was redacted. Maybe she was behind the redaction of that comment because she thought perhaps it implied, taking gayness less seriously than she should, or making light of the fact that a couple of employees were gay, or I don't know. Maybe it sounded a little bit kind of snippy.
Can you give us a sort of edited version of your thing, and then I can give you my reaction? We'll try and recreate my reaction. You were telling us about what this meant for the future of Boris. Yeah,
so it's sort of having to repeat it now makes me realise it isn't terribly
Make it short because it's boring.
I'll keep it short. Okay, so. In order for Boris to face a leadership challenge, 54 Conservative MPs have to submit letters to the 1922 committee saying that they have lost confidence in Boris. And so far, I think we're sort of somewhere between 25 and 30. So we've got another 24 plus to go before first of all, I think what's happened is there's a confidence vote in which Conservative MPs are asked whether they still have confidence in their leader, and only if more than half of them, so in this case I think 180 MPs, only if 180 say that they have lost confidence in Boris, is a leadership election then triggered. And even if a leadership election is triggered because more than half of MPs have lost confidence in him, it's not a foregone conclusion that he'd lose it, although it's quite likely. Anyway, so the speculation within the Westminster Village this week, is the 54-letter threshold going to be reached? Is Boris going to have to face a confidence vote of his own MPs? And if he does, will he prevail? And I think the kind of the consensus is that he will probably survive that confidence vote, not least because, of all the people on the government payroll. I think if you tot up all the government ministers, including the PPSs, which is the kind of lowest job you can have on the lowest rung of a government ladder, I think that comes to something like 173. So that's 173 payroll votes. That's almost at 180, which is roughly, which is half the current parliamentary Conservative Party. So even if there is a confidence vote, he'll probably survive, but he will be wounded. And so that then raises the question of whether he will lead the party in the next general election. And we then went on to say, could I guess what you're going to react to this?
They can communicate by telepathy. They don't even need to speak. So I was asking you to guess what my reaction to your long spiel about this would be.
Yeah, and I think I guessed that you were just going to say boring, not interested.
That's right.
Bread and circuses.
Actually, it's better than that. It's like I said. Do you remember the PG Tips chimpanzees and the old adverts, the chimps in the zoo that drank cups of PG Tips? And I think you did, because we're both of a generation.
Yes.
And I said, even if the PG Tips chimp, which is presumably dead by now, I don't know how long chimpanzees live, even if somebody went to exhume the body of one of the PG Tips chimps and sort of reconstructed it in a kind of cyborg like manner, and it was also injected with monkeypox, even if that chimp were put into number 10, it would make 10 Downing Street, that is, it would make absolutely no difference. It doesn't matter whether the PG chimp, the corpse of the PG Tips chimp is there, whether it's Keir Starmer, whether it's Liz Truss, whether it's Michael Gove. I mean, if Michael Gove were there, things would be harsher and nastier faster than under Johnson or the PG Tips chimp. But apart from that, it would make no difference because all these people are useless puppets. They're puppets of the globalist elite. They have no autonomy. They just do as they're told. So I don't care whether Boris wins or loses. It just does not matter. So there we are.
And I then responded by saying that even though that sounds like, you know, you're kind of straying into Great Reset conspiracy theory territory there. Interestingly, sometimes when members of the government these days are asked what they're going to do about soaring inflation, rising energy prices, the cost of living crisis, they kind of throw up their hands and say, well, we're at the mercy of these global forces. There's not really much we can do about those things, which is, you know, only a thin line between that and what you just said. So perhaps you might be making a few recruits in the cabinet, James.
Well, also, Tobes, don't forget, we developed this point. We were talking about how politicians are always looking for what Tony Blair called eye-catching initiatives. In other words, things that attract the public's attention and seem good, but have absolutely no effect on the bigger picture. So we know where we're heading. We're heading towards famine. We're heading towards power cuts and civil unrest. And what's Boris Johnson talking about? Well, you pointed this out to me.
He's going to bring back imperial measurements to coincide with the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. It's high time we said no to these damn metric measurements and brought back imperial measurements. But we were puzzling over what that meant exactly, because, you know, we don't order half litres of John Smith's when we go to the pub. We don't talk about, you know, a 15-kilometre journey between London and Watford. I mean, what is he, if he doesn't mean pints and miles, you know, which don't need to be brought back because they haven't gone anywhere, does he mean he's going to bring back old money? Are we going to start talking about shillings and guineas and
I hope so.
Sixpences?
I hope so too.
Yeah. But I think we decided that what it means is that instead of buying litres at petrol stations, you'll buy gallons. And we thought this was probably had a double benefit. Not only will it enable Boris to say he's bringing back imperial measurements and damn Johnny Foreigner, but at the same time it'll kind of confuse people about how much more they're paying, because they won't be able to compare what they're paying for a litre now with what they were paying for a litre a week ago, which was probably half as much.
What we need now is one of those adverts. The first advert that I read,
let's have that, because they managed to preserve mine. So I'm afraid you've got to read the ad.
Oh, they've kept yours. Oh, well done. Yeah, drinking plenty of water. I love this company. I really do. I think everyone should use them. Drinking plenty of water is key to our health and well-being, yet not all water is created equal, you betcha. Bottled water is responsible for tons of plastic waste, while your tap water likely contains chlorine, lead, microplastics, and even synthetic hormones. And now government policy, insanity, is to roll out the fluoridation of the entire UK water supply, a so-called safe and effective means of improving oral health. Others disagree. Yeah, I bet they do. I do. The good news is that you can take back control of your water. Finer Filters, a family-run British company, have the very solution. The tankless reverse osmosis filter. Reverse osmosis is the gold standard in water filtration, and Finer Filter's easy-to-install tank-free system fits under your kitchen sink, providing on-demand, deliciously pure water for drinking, cooking, tea and coffee through a separate drinking water tap. If, like me, you prefer your H2O without a side of chlorine, fluoride, lead and hormones, visit filterlondon.com now to secure your tankless reverse osmosis system from Finer Filters. That's filterlondon.com.
So, James, one thing that we didn't discuss in the now lost to posterity episode of London Calling,
killed by God.
we didn't discuss the introduction of an energy windfall tax, as well as Rishi Sunak's huge £15 billion splurge to try and ease kind of the cost of energy bills. And it struck me that I started this campaign, I think in 2015, when Ed Miliband led Labour to defeat in the general election, called Tories for Corbyn, in which I was urging fellow Conservatives to join the Labour Party, which they could do for very little money, in order to vote for Jeremy Corbyn as leader, because, that would consign Labour to electoral oblivion. And some did. I did myself. Corbyn was duly elected leader, though I don't suppose we had much impact on that. And he did lead Labour not just one, but to 2 electoral defeats. And I thought, fantastic, mission accomplished. But what I hadn't anticipated, James, is that some of his more harebrained policies, such as a windfall tax, such as printing money to enable people to afford their energy bills. I didn't imagine for a second that if he was vanquished, if he did consign Labour to electoral oblivion with these crazy socialist policies, that the next Conservative leader, Boris Johnson, would steal those policies and enact them as if Corbyn had won. Yeah. I mean, what was the point, James? What was the point? Well, we're currently living under a Corbyn government, effectively.
I would prefer that. I mean, I told somebody this at dinner the other day, and he looked at me like he was shocked, because he thought he had me down as a right winger, and he considered himself a kind of centrist because he read the Times. And I said, look, at least if Corbyn had got in, he'd have been doing what he promised to do and what we expected him to do. At least Corbyn's got a degree of integrity, which you couldn't say about that awful Johnson. But by the way, I don't read the papers very often, but I did think that Jonathan Sumption, the former one of the Supreme Court law lords, made a very good point about the key point about Partygate, and about not that I care about Partygate, and the still less about the Sue Gray. She called Sue Gray, yes, the Sue Gray report. But he said, first, the Prime Minister personally decided to criminalise almost all social contact, and then behaved as if this did not apply to him or those around him. It really does not matter whether he thought that his parties were allowed by the regulations. Their rationale was that unnecessary human contact was so dangerous that it must be forbidden by law. He cannot have believed a word of it himself, otherwise he would surely not have exposed himself or his staff to this supposedly mortal danger, whether it was technically permitted by the regulations or not. He made his own risk assessment while denying the rest of us the right to make ours. And I think that applies not just to the COVID thing, but to everything. They simply do not care about us at all. I
agree that is the critical point. But my argument, I think, for keeping Boris in office still stands, which is that having behaved with such flagrant hypocrisy, he cannot now impose another lockdown. I know he hasn't ruled it.
It's not up to him, Tobes. It's up to the Global. It's up to Klaus Schwab and the Rockefellers.
Politically, very difficult for him to impose another lockdown, having largely ignored the first 3. I mean, it would just make him look even worse. If he survives this, and that's still an open question, I think he probably will. If he was then to impose another lockdown, if the monkeypox panic kind of increases, and he says, we stay at home.
Panics don't increase by themselves, Tobes. They're orchestrated. The media is desperate on doing the government's bidding. Is trying to stir up the monkeypox. Do
you think with a view to locking us all down again?
Yes.
I think they're going to have to come up with something better than monkeypox. I don't think.
Well, I think most people won't buy into it. But
it sounds sort of comic, doesn't it? Monkeypox. COVID-19 sounds quite sinister. SARS-CoV-2, that's a name for a deadly virus that's going to cause a pandemic. But monkeypox, it just sounds like an invention. It sounds like a kind of virus on The Simpsons, doesn't it?
Well, it was invented. I mean, the whole thing was as I mentioned last time, I think it was planned last year. They even announced the release date. It was going to be May 2022. So yeah, it is all staged. But your point about Boris, I would still rather have the revived corpse of the PG Tips chimp than Boris. I think my dead chimp would
You see,
edge it.
the chimp though would have a kind of special reason. He'd have the kind of standing to impose a lockdown to save us all from monkeypox, because he'd be particularly vulnerable to monkeypox himself. So people would sort of sympathise with him if he said, "You've got to stay in your homes, protect people like me, vulnerable chimps." Anyway,
Yes.
James, I wanted to in previous shows.
We're going to have an ad break there
Okay, no, I think let's have an ad break. James, what's even better than an office chair that offers more than 10 customised adjustments to allow you to work in perfect support and comfort for hours on end? Better than a chair that can heat up or cool down, or that offers 4 different massage options? Well, how about the opportunity to get that chair at a huge discount? Of course, I'm talking about X-Chair. And if you've ever listened to this programme, then you know how much I love my X-Chair. Hands down, it is the most comfortable office chair that I've ever used. Well, this Memorial Day weekend, X-Chair is offering an amazing sale on select models, offering you an unprecedented opportunity to get the chair of your dreams at a deep, deep discount. How much? How about up to $480 off on certain models? And if you already own an X-Chair and want to add some accessories, then you're in luck, because those are on sale as well. But you better hurry, because this one-time sale only lasts through Memorial Day, which is today. So if you want to save big bucks on the ultimate office chair, then you need to go to xchairlondon.com now. That's the letter X, the word chair, then LONDON.com, or in the US, call 1-844-4XChair. Don't miss this one-time only sale. Go to xchairlondon.com. I'd like to apologise. I want to take this opportunity, James, to apologise to climate change activists, because in the past I've suggested that some of their stunts, some of their protests, such as lying down in the middle of the street, trying to stop commuters getting to work, gluing themselves to corporate headquarters of energy giants like BP. I may have suggested in the past that they didn't quite grasp how to win over kind of people in the middle ground to the rightness of their cause. In the course of persuading people that their climate alarmism wasn't a hysterical overreaction to some dodgy climate models. I'm not sure this is the right way to persuade people that actually they're being sane and sensible. And I've criticised their protests in the past, but I take it all back, James, because actually a climate change activist has come up with an absolutely brilliant way to win over any reasonable centrists who might have some reservations about net zero by 2050, or in the case of Extinction Rebellion, I think they want it by 2025. Anyway, they've come up with a brilliant stunt which I think will actually work. So a climate change activists disguised themselves as a disabled woman, got an accomplice to wheel them in front of the Mona Lisa in the Louvre, and then smashed the glass protective front of the painting, and then threw a cake at the picture of the Mona Lisa. Now, come on, you've got to admit, if anything's going to persuade the waverers that these are sensible, concerned, rational people whose reservations about the net zero target being taking far too long should be taken very seriously, what's going to convince people more than smashing the glass in front of the world's most famous and most treasured work of art and throwing a cake at the painting in the hope of vandalising it? Brilliant stunt, James. I mean, I take it all back.
Yeah, but you see, my argument is that they've won, because here you are talking about these no marks. You wouldn't be talking about the issue. I mean, it's all very well saying we know that it's rubbish, that the whole environmental cause is bankrupt and based on false information, but it just subtly reinforces in the imagination of the brain-dead public, who are susceptible to all the mainstream media's propaganda, which I include reports of things like this, and it all it does is add to the general sense that I'm not sure about this climate change thing, but it must be pretty serious if somebody's prepared to vandalise the Mona Lisa. That's how they're not as sophisticated as you think, but it's
well, climate change activists certainly aren't.
It's how you ram home propaganda messages. I mean, Goebbels could have told you this Gustave Le Bon could have told you this. Edward Bernays could have told you this. It's not so much about what you and I, sort of being subtle intellects, think about this. It's about the reinforcement of the narrative ad nauseam. And, the Mona Lisa is quite a famous picture. And clearly, if you vandalise it, I mean, if this person had vandalised it and we hadn't known what their cause was, I would agree they would have failed. But we do know what their cause of, and here we are talking about these scum, and I call them scum, not least because the people on whose behalf they're really acting are the very people behind the World Economic Forum, the kind of the predator class, the elite that I despise, that you think is still a conspiracy theory. But I know, because I've been following their antics over a period of years. I've written a book about it, and I can tell you the environmental movement is of a piece with the World Economic Forum agenda, with the agenda of owning nothing and being happy. Environmentalism is one of the weapons they use to advance their cause, to make life more expensive for us, to deprive us of our freedoms, to stop us flying where we want to, and so on. So I almost resent having to talk about the vandalisation of Mona Lisa as a kind of a sort of comedy item or a sort of quirky item, because it's actually, when you analyse it, it's really, really serious and really worrying.
Well, you sort of are assuming there, James, that all publicity is good publicity. And if we're talking about the latest crazy antics of these climate change eco-fascists, that must be doing their cause some good. But
no.
I disagree. I would have thought that they're not doing their cause any good. And the more we talk about antics like this, the more harm we'll do their cause.
Well, we can agree to disagree on that one. I think I explained my point well, that it doesn't matter about what you think about the nuances of the argument. The fact is that yet again, environmentalism is on the map, and people will go, well, they wouldn't be protesting about it if there weren't something in it. That's how people think, Anyway.
James,
we're going to do Culture Corner because otherwise I'm going to get
you're going to get into trouble. Okay, all right, yeah, sure.
Free email services like Gmail and Yahoo aren't really free. You pay with your privacy. In fact, internet giants like Big Tech bank on exploiting your data by selling it to the highest bidder. Your business plan? Google has it. Your medical records? Yahoo can sell them to drug companies. That's why I use StartMail. It makes me feel safe again. StartMail keeps my email private. Period. Every email can be encrypted even if the recipient doesn't use encryption. When you delete an email in StartMail, it's gone forever. And StartMail uses their own servers, not Amazon's, which means they can't be put out of business. Switching to StartMail is seamless too. You can easily transfer all your current email data, so there's no starting from scratch. StartMail is also backed by the most stringent privacy laws in the world. You get unlimited anonymous aliases. This feature protects your main email address from spam and phishing attacks. So, when you're giving your email to a company but want to protect your identity, StartMail can generate a shareable alias email so people can't sell your information, and they can be deleted anytime. Your cybersecurity has never been more at risk. Email snoops and scammers are taking advantage of the pandemic as phishing has skyrocketed in the last year. Take control of your privacy with StartMail before it's too late. Start securing your email privacy with StartMail. Sign up today and you'll get 50% off your first year. Go to startmail.com/London. That's startmail with a T, StartMail.com/London for 50% off your first year. Startmail.com/London.
So, James, I have to confess that I've given up on Severance. I got to episode 5 and the pace was just so glacial.
Well, it's great that you don't have to watch it. You've saved loads of... so what have you been watching that's good?
So I have been tucking into Stranger Things Season 4, which I have to say I've been quite enjoying. And you gave up on Stranger Things midway through Season 2, is that right?
Just let me stop you there. That is such a Toby remark. I've been quite enjoying. You seem to have a really generous tolerance threshold for stuff that I would just... If it doesn't completely rock my boat, I'm not watching it. Like Stranger Things 1 was great, and then Season 2 I thought, well, it's just like they're spinning it out, aren't they? They're doing a loss. They're trying to... I don't care. I wanted it to end on season 1 on a kind of with the problem solved, an upside down world or whatever it's called, the door closed forever. But so what's happening now?
Yeah, well, funnily enough, James, the gate to the upside down has reopened again.
Yeah, funny that.
You think they go to all these lengths to shut the gate during the kind of final episode of each of these seasons, and sure enough, in the final episode of season 3, they shut the gate. Sorry if that's a spoiler if anyone hasn't seen season 3 yet, but lo and behold, the gate is open again in season 4, so they have to shut it all over again. And you kind of think at some point they're going to ask themselves, what's the point? we risk life and limb, we make this enormous effort, we defy the odds to shut the gate, and it only reopens again a few weeks later. But anyway, so yeah, it's the same old but I kind of the formula, the kind of Spielbergian kind of geeky teens taking on the dark forces that are going to destroy the planet in this kind of nostalgic kind of 1980s bubble. I like that. I like all the 80s songs on the soundtrack, the outfits, and the kids are kind of, there's something pretty engaging about them, and I sort of identify
they
with
must
these
be about
kind of
60 now,
nerdy
kids.
Misfits. Well, that one issue, James, is that they're now looking a bit long in the tooth to be playing teens. There's a new character in season 4 who's the kind of chair of the local Dungeons and Dragons club in the high school, and he's called the Freak, and he's a murder suspect, and this kind of town mob kind of pursues him, and he looks about 60, and yet he's supposed to be a high school student. I mean, and he's in this band, this kind of rock band with these other kind of nerdy misfits, and they all look as though they're well into their 40s. I mean, the idea that they're 18 is just preposterous. Yeah. So you have to suspend disbelief about that. But the rest of the kids, I mean, I'd say 11, the kind of central character, the kind of the teenage girl with kind of supernatural telekinetic superpowers. She now looks about 25.
I was going to say
30,
she must do.
Say,
yeah. It's a bit like Hermione was looking about sort of 50, wasn't she, by the end of the
I suppose you could say
series.
that the strangest thing about Stranger Things is that these clearly grown adults are playing teenage kids, but if you could, I'm perfectly able to suspend disbelief. And no, I've been really enjoying it. I'm now into episode 4. I'm lapping it up. I'm devouring it, James. So I'd recommend it.
We were going to do Ricky Gervais. Well, we did do Ricky Gervais, but I feel that we want more time to be able to do it justice.
Let's do Ricky. Let's do Ricky, and then let's call it a wrap.
Oh, okay,
James.
All right then. Okay, so
I thought your take on that was quite good.
It's been. I've read numerous columns in the Mail and elsewhere saying, we stand by Ricky Gervais. This is the kind of brave, he speaks for all of us. And obviously they're referring to the fake furore generated over the fact that he's made some jokes about transgender men or women or whatever you call them, sort of men going into women's changing room when they haven't had their bits locked off and stuff, and it's good. I mean, I like Ricky Gervais's delivery, and I've always liked. I've followed his career right from near the start, and it's nice that this bloke from Reading now gets, he gets $20 million for one of those shows.
Amazing.
For this one and the last one, he got $20 million each. And he makes jokes about how rich he is, and I think, fair play, you've done well, Ricky. And he's got a good delivery, and I like the way he sticks it to the lovies used to at the Golden Globes. But he keeps telling you throughout this show about how edgy and dangerous he is, and he keeps announcing, they're never going to put that sketch in. I'm not going to have any material left for this show because they're going to cut it all out. And of course, every time they do include the material, because actually he's not as controversial as he thinks he is, and particularly on this transgender thing. If he'd done this in a show 4 years ago, that would have been probably at the bleeding edge of comedy bravery. But now, who cares about? I mean, I know transgenderism is entrenched in the civil service. But most people, certainly his audience, will now be well coming round to the idea that this is a pain in the bum and they don't want any more of this stuff. And so he's not really taking a risk in the way he was.
Yeah, well,
is my view.
Yeah, I think I think you're right in that it's not as dangerous to challenge kind of trans rights activists now as it was, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
It feels as though the tide has turned on that issue, and the public is not as cowed as it was when it comes to laughing at kind of trans woke activism. I think that's true, but I think that one of the reasons the show isn't as kind of electrifying as I was hoping. I mean, like you, I think it's good. He's funny. It's well worth a watch, and he's definitely kind of one of the good guys on our side. But I think when he's saying some of those kind of politically incorrect things, when he's attacking the woke, and he's doing it at the Golden Globes, and he's saying it to people who worship at that altar, when he's ridiculing the church they're all members of, it feels kind of it's really satisfying.
Which church is that? I don't think they're members of the church, are they, that lot?
The Church of Wokest Day.
Oh, I see. Right, yeah.
But in the absence of those people there, it feels kind of less brave, less transgressive, as you say. It's sort of like, it's almost as though it's just Ricky Gervais preaching to the choir, getting a lot of laughs from his audience who are reading out of his hand, and it doesn't feel quite as it's not. It doesn't have that spark that seeing him say those same things to the kind of Hollywood in crowd does.
Well, the other thing is that his views are very millennial. So he's big into his animal rights. Fine. He doesn't believe in God. He thinks God's a big sky fairy or whatever, and people who believe in him are idiots. And he's got tremendous faith in the power of science. Well, of course, this belief in the power of science is what's got us into the recent mess. And you note that this is supposed to be topical comedy, and yet he's ignored the biggest event of the last 2 years, the one that's affected everyone's lives. He had nothing to say about the pandemic or the lockdowns or any of the fascistic government policy or any of that, because he was busy telling everyone to get the jab, and I don't know.
Yeah, that's true.
He didn't speak out against it, certainly.
Yeah, and I wonder if that is because he kind of doesn't want to challenge a policy that was supposedly based on the science, and he doesn't want to be accused of being a kind of anti-science denier, or whether it's because he's just a bit lazy and hasn't written any new material for the last kind of 10 to 15 years. I mean, a lot of it does feel as though it was written around 2020, at the height of the kind of new atheist kind of trend, and it could have almost been performed in 2019. Pre-pandemic, as you say, it's a kind of lacuna in the show, is that he almost doesn't refer to it.
Well, actually, you know what, Tobes? I think maybe the most daring thing about the show is that it got away with this for $20 million. Look how little I can do for $20 million. But you couldn't do that little.
No, I certainly couldn't. No. Anyway, so today, for instance, third time I've recorded this podcast, and what do we get for it? 10 quid.
Exactly.
So you wouldn't see Ricky Gervais redoing the podcast. Yeah.
Ain't that the truth? Okay, well, I'm gonna stop this. Oh, blimey! Which button? I've forgotten which button you press. Is it the one in the middle?
You press the one in the middle, and then don't panic when it says Untitled, and it goes back to 0. You then click the red button in the corner.
Okay, so the one in the middle first. Are you sure?
One in the middle first. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's do it now, James.
Right.
Let's say goodbye to our listeners.
Right. Bye.
See ya.
This is London Calling.
Ricochet. Join the conversation.